I love selling, coaching salespeople, mentoring sales leaders. You name it about selling, and I'm there. I live by the old saying that nothing happens until something is sold. Most of all, though, I'm fascinated with the change in selling, especially the changes brought about by the pandemic. Not for the moment, but for all time, these are happening. My guest today is an authority on all things sales and on selling during uncertainty. Well, he wrote the book. So let's not waste any time and get started with the BBTV Top Gun Lance Tyson show by saying, welcome, Lance.
Malcolm, thanks for having me on today. I'm excited.
It's great to meet you. And I'll just let our viewers know that you're in Ohio, aren't you?
I am in the great state of Ohio. And I was telling Malcolm earlier, we're getting a little bit of snow here. So, maybe snow over the holidays.
Right. Oh, God, I can imagine. Please, Lance, don't halfway through start singing White Christmas, will you?
It depends. If it was a little later, I might.
Yeah, right. Okay. This Lance Tyson BBTV got Top Gun show is in our usual web show 3 parts. In part 3, he'll tell you exactly about his sales system. In part 2, I'll be asking him what changes salespeople and sales leaders need to make now to be on point, not just for today, but 21 onwards. And in part 1, he'll tell you what he believes is happening in the world of sales at this moment. But Lance, before we get started on part 1, give us a brief overview of yourself and what you do. Oh, and what your Igniting Sales EQ book's about.
I appreciate that. So I'm an author and a speaker, and more an author speaker because I, for years, worked for Dale Carnegie Training, and probably one of the best sales books ever is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I know in order to survive, it's publish or perish, right? That's kind of the game we're in. And over the last 10 years, we've formed a company called Tyson Group, and we're in the business of coaching, consulting, and training sales leaders and their sales teams to compete in a complex world. We play pretty hard in the sports and entertainment space, and I can tell you, with uncertainty being the name of the game, it's not a great time to be in the business of helping sports teams and entertainment venues get large groups of people together. So a lot of my customer base and our own company, we've had to evolve, and evolution's revolution, right? And through the summer, I was getting a lot of feedback on emotional quotient, people, the headspace of salespeople. A lot of people are struggling. A lot of business startups and scale-ups are struggling. Let's put out just a quick consumable read, and we just put it out on Amazon called Igniting Sales EQ. And it's really, in sales and in business, how do you deal with that headspace a little bit with some sound advice?
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I've still got my dog-eared Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends and Influence book on the shelf just over there from 1972, I think it was.
It is a classic, and
isn't it? Yeah.
It's relevant today as it was when it was written. So
yeah.
In 1936, it was written.
Wow, was it? Wow, yeah. I wasn't around then. You do understand, Lance. I wasn't quite around then. But look,
I completely understand.
Yes, I'm fascinated about the EQ as well, emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, because it really is bouncing through in leadership, not just sales there. So thanks, Lance. Let's get into part 1. What's happening in the world of sales at the moment that we all need to take about? How are buyers acting and reacting?
I think that's probably the most interesting question, because if it depends what industry you're in, and I think you and I talked about this as we were pre-gaming this. You have a lot of haves and have-nots. So we had done over the last couple of years a lot of business with a logistics company, and we've done a ton of negotiating work with them. And I was talking to their CEO, and we were talking about the next phase of what we were going to do. And then he kind of hit the brakes on the project. And I kind of challenged him a little bit. I said, your industry has to be doing pretty well. He goes, we are. And he goes, unfortunately, though, our cash conversion table was sitting under 30 days. It is grinding up near 60 days now, because we might be doing good, but some of the people we do business with aren't doing good. Now, let's take that net effect, right? think about it this way. We've always been taught if you're in a B2B sales, you got to sell to the individual, but you have to sell to the organization. Or if you're in B2C, you're selling to the individual. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. Everybody's affected by this pandemic. Let's look at it in a very primal way. You and I opened up before we even got on camera and talked about COVID and how it's affecting our families, how it's affecting how we do business. If you think about the two baseline of Maslow's hierarchy, right? The foundational layout, it's safety and security. There's really not a person on the planet or business on the planet that is not worried about their own security and own safety. Not that they're necessarily going to be harmed, but am I going to have a job? Am I going to make payroll? Am I going to make this next sale? Am I going to hit quota? Most businesses are off that I talk to are anywhere off from 25 to 50% of revenue. And then when it gets to a salesperson, though, how we have to sell, we're asking salespeople to do more, right? You're starting to see a lot of salespeople having to prospect harder than they ever had to before, right? Because like you said at the beginning of the show, nothing happens to a salesman, right? Mm-hmm. Well, getting in the door. So if you look at that net effect, buyers are behaving probably more conservatively because they're worried about what it looks like in the future. There's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, and it's affected everybody personally from that personal motivation, that EQ space. So it is a 360-degree effect. And that's what I see has changed, at least.
And it's not going to go away. Just sort of talking further down that line with you there, we spend a lot of our time on helping people win contracts, bidding for public sector as well as supply chain. And buyers have really changed their attitude there. They're looking not for so much for what you do, but who you are as a business now. Are you finding that too?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not big on, and people listening to this might get challenged with what I say. I don't love the word relationship in sales because I believe relationship's an outcome. Okay. I believe very much in the word rapport because that's something I can do.
Yeah.
Right. I can go to the local pub, have rapport with who tends the bar. Right. Mm. Over time, I might have a relationship. I think though, you're really looking at people getting to know you, that human to human sale is, at the end of the day, people buy from people. Right. And we sell to people and they want to make sure they can trust you. There's been a ton of, and you probably have seen this in your own world. There's been a lot of organizations that haven't fulfilled contracts for various reasons. Trust is at a premium at this point. Right. So we are seeing that more so than ever. And on top of that, also a lot of sales processes have elongated.
Yeah.
So they're going to people are making decisions slower. So you're going to have to, selling you is a big part of what it is moving forward, more so than ever, I think.
I'm totally with you on that word rapport rather than relationships. Relationships just end in alimony, don't they? Yeah. Right. Thanks, Lance. Let's go to part 2. So change is happening in customers and buyers and in the way selling is being done very differently. Where do salespeople and sales leaders need to make changes, say, especially in handling virtual selling?
That's interesting. We, you and I were talking about Liverpool, the soccer team or the football team in England, and some of our big customer. That's one of our big customers is at Fenway Sports Management, and the gentleman that runs that organization in Boston in last October, he said, we really want to focus more on how to sell virtually. And this is way before the pandemic. And I call him a genius now because he was thinking about this before. He goes, well, I had no idea there's a pandemic going to happen. But we start to focus on that with a couple organizations then because people are trying to reduce the cost of selling and things like that. So the world that's really changed selling, one thing we got to all remember is, and you said it earlier, any leader or salesperson that says when we're going to get back to normal, stop saying it. Yeah. Welcome. This is normal. We are now in normal. It's a new business reality. So just stop saying it because we're not going back. People will think twice before hopping in a plane to go to LA or hopping in a plane to go over to London. It's easier to do a Zoom. 2, though, there's a lot of bad habits that have come up. Like, for instance, I was coaching a client yesterday, and we were talking about formalities and informalities around Zoom. Like, why have a Zoom meeting if people aren't going to turn their camera on? So how do you actually politely facilitate people turning their camera on? You might as well just have a phone call if somebody's not going to turn their camera on, right? Two, one of my salespeople the other day had a huge pitch, and what are starting to, you can share content so easily over Zoom right now. Well, he was dealing with the price objection, and literally he kept the slide with the investment up. They were telling him it's too high, and all he was doing on the screen was emphasizing that piece. He should have pulled the content down and dealt with the objection. Yeah. So these are these little tiny things. It's like, and you've been presenting for multiple years. If you don't need the slide, you hit B on the keyboard and put the slide down. You become the presentation, not the presentation. So there's so many little things that I think we're starting to get into now, and people are going, "Oh, that's a great idea," or "Oh, I hadn't even really thought about that." My dad used to say, if you take care of the little things, the big things take care of themselves. And I think as we're selling virtually, we're going to have to really be thinking about dotting I's and crossing T's and those little things. So I think that's a big change. And I would say categorize that, Malcolm, under facilitation. How well are we facilitating?
Yeah. And also back to your EQ, actually reading the person that you're selling to, and it's not as easy because you can't get those nuances and you can't get the side glances to a colleague or anything like that, can you? It's harder, but it's a skill that we've all got to learn, as you quite rightly say.
It is. I mean, you think about the name of the game is, and I've really been hearing this a lot lately from other thought leaders, the whole mirroring and matching that we were taught years ago, but the reading of buying and warning signals. And the problem with a virtual sales, like you just said, you can't get the glance to a colleague. You can't see if somebody's rubbing their hands, if their hands are down. And I can't even tell if somebody's paying attention. You could be watching reruns of a TV show. I could be reading typing an email and acting like I'm looking into the camera. So the art of asking the evaluative question or the trial close becomes, you got to really step your game up there, really, and especially seasoned salespeople that have forgotten those things.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I always remember, Lance, just a little chat. I was doing a sales into a local authority, and I was wanting them to get on with it and get the check written and to get started, and they took me into a room to wait the two people who were coming in, and it was a huge long boardroom table. I'm thinking, where do I sit? Well, I'll sit where the UK Prime Minister does, right in the middle, and in came the two, and one sat at one end and one at the other. And they were just out of peripheral vision, if you know what I mean. Yeah, can you imagine this on big screen? They came in, and so I went in, said, so can we get on with it? And I noticed that one just caught him at the side of my head, nudging his eyes to the other one, So I was then able to close it. How could I have done that on virtual?
That would have been really tough on virtual.
Yeah.
It might have been even better on virtual, though. Because they couldn't glance at each other. You have them both up at the same screen together.
They'll try it. Buyers are quickly working out new ideas to how to handle the usual objections and the usual things that they had, how to put it onto virtual. But we'll be ahead of them. We'll help our viewers get ahead, won't we, Lance?
Yeah, and think about it, Malcolm, you said it well. We're going to be in this hybrid model for a while, because you're going to have to, as a salesperson, depending what kind of business you're in, and as a sales leader, it is, some calls you're going to have like that. Some are going to go phone calls. We just now have that. And so in some industries, we will, face-to-face selling is not going to go away. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, but it's not going to be at the level it was before, because it's going to be very easy for people to say, hey, let's just meet this way. Yeah. So we've added another way to sell. A big way to sell might be a third of the way we do it.
Yeah. And in the end, since we know, and I've been to 300 of these events that you're kindly doing with me today since March, and that's a huge amount around the world. In the end, I think you get to know the buyer better.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing we're seeing in some of our research is a lot of the sales calls now, depending on what type of business you're in, again, I don't mean to speak for everybody, there's a lot of fragmented conversations that happen. So you have a lot of smaller, shorter conversations. So you got to keep momentum going, but you do get to know. I mean, think how many people's you're in my house. Welcome to my house, Malcolm.
Yeah.
You've visited everybody's home inside this.
I have.
Everybody,
Yeah.
kids have made appearances, all kinds of stuff going on. So
yeah, one top CEO had to put the washing away, but no, there are many other stories to tell you. Let's move on to part 3, and this is the bit I've been really looking forward to, as you tell us about your sales system, what it's called, what it does, how it works.
Yeah, so we've had I have a book out called Selling is an Away Game. So we have this foundational program that's 6 steps, and really much, if you buy into this analogy, it will make sense here. It really follows a system of almost like visiting a doctor's office or a hospital or a dental office, but it really kind of follows certain steps. So if you were going to a doctor's office or the hospital, there'd be some kind of connection. They would connect with you with your biometrics. They'd know a little bit about your health, who you are, find out what your situation is. Then you would go into a room, talk to a doctor, a nurse practitioner, dentist. They would do some kind of evaluation on you. So they evaluate your current and desired. So is it a sick visit? What's their past? What should it look like? And there's a gap established. Inside that gap, and I want everybody to remember this, lawyers, doctors, dentists, they practice medicine. It's not as much, it's an opinion, right? Yeah. It's their best educated opinion. So follow the science, but remember, they get it wrong. That's why they call it practice, right? So then that doctor and that evaluation, that dentist, that lawyer, whoever it is, they then diagnose, and that diagnosis, and now we do the same thing in sales many times. I don't care if you're in retail. I don't care if you sell a very complex sale, just a matter of steps. We're all connecting. We're all evaluating a current situation. Then we're diagnosing, and then we prescribe. That's the fourth step of our fourth step of our process. Excuse me. There's some kind of prescription, suggestion, solution. Then from there, anytime anybody's ever prescribed anything to you, there's a dialogue about the prescription. I had COVID, and they gave me a prescription. They want you to take this inhaler. They wanted me to take Zithromax, even though it wasn't a bacteria. And I didn't understand why. They were just trying to be safe, but there was a prescription, and I need to understand the side effects of that. Right. And then from there, after that dialogue, there's some kind of closure or commitment. So that's our primary foundational step our methodology called Away Game Selling. Now, I have a book coming out in March that's going to add a 7th step at the front end, because talking to our publisher and some of our partners, prospecting is now the hottest topic. Go look it up on Google, how many times it's searched 90,000 times a month. Prospecting. So our new book's called Sell the Concept, The Art of Prospecting, Winning Time, and Getting in the Door. And so we're going to add in front of that just a part. Our process will become 7 steps, because we're going to really, not that we didn't teach prospecting before we did, but I just kind of, I want you to think of that example too, because we just engaged with a major pharmaceutical and working with almost 3,000 of their salespeople. And they said, hey, we really need some work on prospecting. And I'm like, okay. I said, talk to me about that. And they said, well, our whole sales process, we follow a value-based methodology. Our whole sales process assumes that we're in front of a doctor. And the whole sales part, we're there, we pitch the drug. And I thought often through my life, geez, how easy would it be to sell drugs, right? If I work for a pharmaceutical, you show up, you bring some coffee, you bring some donuts, you talk to a doctor, right? You sell your drugs. Well, they said, our problem right now in protocol, you can't get in to see the doctor. Yeah. You now have to navigate this virtual office and leverage that virtual office to get in the door. Now we have to, Lance, compete against every other vendor that's trying to get into that practice.
Yes.
So that becomes a hot topic. But I think the big thing inside of COVID is there are some studies out there that were done by Florida State about 6 years ago that are ringing true today. And they did this study that, and this is what our system has always been built on, is this thought of strategy and mindset. What's the mindset of the buyer, and what's your strategy toward it? What tactics are you going to use, and can you skill up to get there? And that's part of our approach into the sales methodology. Florida State did this study on what made a successful salesperson. They studied about 70 different sales organizations and about 160 different salespeople, top performers. The key factor they found out is most of the high performers had the ability to be agile, okay, inside an opportunity. That meant they had multiple strategies that they approached. So when you take any methodology, or prospecting, and then the sales methodology that goes along with it, do you have the ability to have multiple strategies, and can you be agile? And I think inside of this new business reality we're in, if you're not doing that from a sales perspective and aren't ready, you're going to struggle. So that's why I don't think every salesperson is going to succeed through this. No. This pandemic will take you can't train everything. Not every sales skill set's trainable or coachable. No. So
and those that have learned it by rote as well, they're going to fall by the way, because unless you're agile and adaptable, you're going to get nowhere, aren't you?
I agree. And that's kind of capitalism, isn't it? Evolve and adapt and be agile, or you'll get eaten. So.
Quite right. Yeah. Lance, I've thoroughly enjoyed talking and listening to you about my favorite subject, selling. You've really opened my eyes wide to new opportunities and some of the moment thinking. In this special Lance Tyson Top Gun web show, I've been talking to the person who truly is passionate about your sales success. Thank you, Lance Tyson.
Thanks, Malcolm.